Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode number 1.
Number 1.
It's very exciting. We've never done anything like this before.
Never.
So
well, that's not true. You've done this before a little bit.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I'm the newbie here.
Yeah. This is live, though.
It is live.
All right, so we're going to start off with 3 individual quotes that I found that I feel like correctly summarizes what we're about to do right now.
Okay.
Quote number 1. If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse, by Mr. Jim Rohn. I have really wanted to do a podcast for a while now. I've wanted to do one arguably for the last year and a half to 2, probably longer than that. I uploaded a very, very short, off-the-hip podcast while I was drunk, drinking wine, answering dog training questions, back when I was doing my little weekly, daily vlog. I uploaded it. It stayed up for about a week, and then I took it down, and I was like, I'm not doing this right now. I found excuses for not doing it.
Yeah.
Quote number 2. If you talk about it, it's a dream. If you envision it, it's possible. But if you schedule it, it's real, by Mr. Tony Robbins. I talked about it. I dreamed about it. I envisioned it. I talked about it with all of my closest friends. Josh and I have talked about it numerous times, I'm sure, in the last couple of years. Yeah. And we never did it until we put it on the schedule.
That's so true.
We picked a time. We picked a place.
Yep.
And here we are doing it.
Yep.
It's scheduled. It's real. Every single Thursday morning, we will be sitting down and filming this goddamn podcast. So.
Yep. You put it on the calendar, it makes you accountable.
That is correct. Quote number 3. Every day, do something that makes you uncomfortable, by Mr. David Goggins. David Goggins is one of the baddest motherfuckers on the planet.
Yeah.
And he does things that make him uncomfortable, which means that I can do things that make me uncomfortable. And guess what? Doing things live makes me pretty uncomfortable. I can sit down in front of a camera, and if I have a million if I know that I have the ability to click end and restart, I'm fine. Yeah. But when I'm sitting down in an episode like this, where we're not going to touch the camera, it's going to stay on for the next hour or whatever it is that we're doing this, it's a little hard for me.
Yeah.
I get nervous. I feel my heart rate racing a little bit right now. I got this cup of coffee that I'm looking at right now that's halfway empty, and I know is not going to last me through this entire thing, and it's stressing me out a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. So Josh and I both have a background in live performance. We know each other through music. We both played in local bands. Both of those local bands became fairly successful, and we got an opportunity to tour around the country and play music for people. And in my case personally, I have never in my life felt any sort of stage fright. I can't remember a single time I've gotten on stage and been like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous right now to perform, right?
Yeah.
And in my case, I think I can equate that to, I was a guitar player. So because of that, I was not the focal point of the band, right? I was able to go up there and I felt like the pressure was a little bit off. And then on top of that, because I was performing at times in front of quite a few people, I couldn't like single in on like I'm disappointing this person or I'm performing badly for this person or whatever it is. Josh, you were a singer.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
It's pretty great. I kind of like being the center of attention, which is very odd because I feel very uncomfortable right now with the whole live thing, like you just said. But I liked being the person that brought everything together, directed the crowd. Obviously, I said mean things to people. That was my job. So
Josh was in a metal band where saying mean things to people was kind of the standard.
It's the standard. You were supposed to be mean. But no, I enjoyed it greatly, surprisingly, because I'm not usually that kind of a person outside of that. But I think it's just because I was so comfortable with doing it for so long, And I think that's how we're going to get with this, is the more we do it, the more it's just going to be like second nature. Mm-hmm. So
I guess we'll talk a little bit about how we got here, why we're doing this, what we're trying to accomplish with it, stuff like that. So, like I said, I've been wanting to do a podcast for a very long time. I think that where media is right now and its importance to business, I think the fact that I haven't done one up until this point is a huge mistake, and I've lost quite a bit of time to do it. I think the problem was I needed to figure out the right mishmash of what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to convey with it. I feel like I needed to hit a point with my company where I was able to block out the time to be able to do this and not feel like I should be doing other things. And then being able to kind of get it in a way where it wasn't going to take up, infinite amounts of time for me, aside from, like I said, the scheduled out mornings on Thursdays to get it rolling. So I have been training dogs now for the last 6 to 7 years. It's been quite a while. I have done it professionally for myself, meaning owning my own company, for the last 5.5 years. And it's been a road, man.
To say the least.
I've had 2 different companies, the first of which I had a business partner with. I left that company 2.5 years ago now. Just over 2 years ago now, and started my own company, Miracle Canine Training, where, we wanted to continue and evolve and grow and stuff. And we'll obviously get into talking about all of that kind of stuff. Before I owned my own company, I worked for somebody for a little bit, for almost 2 years, which that was a whole shit show in itself. And my training style has evolved quite a bit. Where I've learned from has evolved quite a bit. And it's been it's been an adventure, to share the least, and I'm excited to kind of share that with everybody. I think that I've seen so much in the dog training world in the last 6-7 years here, that when I see newer trainers or I see companies around me, and I see friends that are involved in the industry and stuff like that, I feel like I have things to share with people. I feel like we've hit a point of success now where we have a pretty fine-tuned machine, and we're excited to kind of get that rolling a little bit here. Josh and I have been working with each other on and off for the last 3 years now, something like that. It's been quite a while. He's been with me a long time. He's seen a lot of stuff. He's been to seminars with me filming things. He's videoed all of the ins and outs of both of those companies. He's seen the ups, the downs, all of the good stuff. So when I sat down and was like, okay, cool, we're looking to start a podcast here. We're looking to get it rolling. How do I want to do this? First thing that came to my mind was having somebody that is able to film and somebody that's able to handle a lot of that kind of back end stuff for that. He was the first person that I thought of for that. And then on top of that, I've always said I hate podcasts that are just one person talking to a camera. And that's 90% of what I do at the company is I am talking to my audience. I am talking to my clients. When I'm filming videos that go up on our social media channels, I am talking to the camera or to the viewer, or whatever it may be. And that's fine for short little things, or it's fine for getting your point across in educational related stuff, but it feels so lectury, and when I'm listening to podcasts like that, I space out so easily. It's really hard for me to kind of get into a swing of things. So, as I continued to think about it, and I realized how much time Josh had spent around the dogs and around the training and seen the business side of things and all of that kind of stuff, I decided I wanted to do a little bit more of a conversational kind of podcast. I wanted to have somebody I could bounce ideas off of with, and I wanted somebody that I could, have some dialogue with and keep the thing rolling. And I think that Josh has a really, really interesting insight into things because he's seen all of the training related stuff and the business related stuff, and he owns his own company, and he owns a dog, right? So, it's kind of a cool little, it's a cool touch to things where he's not a dog trainer, obviously, but he's able to have a lot of this insight that's past what your standard pet owner would have, but isn't quite where the dog trainer would be at. So it can be articulated in a different or better way as we're talking about these topics.
True.
So, in addition to that, this is not going to be just a dog training focused podcast. Obviously, that's what it's centered around. Like, I'm a dog trainer. That's what I do for a living. And I have a lot of passion and pride behind that. But I own a business, right? I focus a lot on personal development work. I read a lot of books. I'm very interested in the leadership aspect of things and all of that. So I want to kind of get into those types of topics as well, and be able to kind of discuss those things in a setting where it feels more appropriate, right? This is not Miracle Canine Training's Instagram that, I'm posting videos to and stuff like that. This is a little bit more centered around me. It's a little bit more centered around Josh. It's a little bit more centered around us as individuals and as people. And I think that's really cool and something that I'm trying to get across with this podcast.
Yeah. I think I know people are going to expect, some dog training stuff, but I think also having me instead of maybe having another dog trainer on here, we can get into those topics that have to do with either business or finance or just life in general. This is more of a all around type of podcast instead of just dog training. But as you said, obviously that's more of a center sphere, but there's no reason why we can't go out of that into other topics. And maybe people in the future will have questions that we can answer or try to answer for other things.
Yeah.
And we can just talk about our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. So Josh, why don't you go ahead and talk for a minute about what you do, your company, kind of what led you there, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So my company is Josh Dobey Productions, media-driven company. Started on my own probably about 4 years ago now. I was a manager at Melt Bar and Grilled. Knew that life was not for me. I'm just a creative. I've been in bands all my life, pretty much. So I needed a new outlet for my creativity and a way to pay the bills. So I had a couple of friends that had a studio downtown at the time, and they were the Casey Neistat wannabes. And it just seemed like such an exciting life, an exciting time to be able to create and make money off of it. So I got the credit cards out, which was the worst thing to do ever. But I bought everything I needed to start off being a YouTube vlogger, which is not what happened at all. But I started really making money in real estate, doing photography, walkthrough videos of houses, properties, and then just kind of found my way back up here in Cleveland, and David needed a media manager. And that's kind of where I really started to hone my abilities, was when I was working with him and his previous business. And I don't know, man, I just kind of was all over the place for a long time, and then I finally have honed myself down to the things that I really want to do, which is video work, product photography, and portraits. And that's how I've kind of made myself full circle from where I started with you in the beginning to knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And that's why you came to me, because you knew this was kind of something that I was looking to do. It was like this media-driven direction, media managing, stuff like that. So I guess self-made, I don't know how to explain myself really well. It's like I just took a whole new direction in my life, and as you said, you gotta, those quotes from earlier were basically, where my life is. I just had to schedule it. I just had to do it, and I've created my business around how I wanted, the clients that I want, and take my life in the direction that I want. So I don't know, that might have been a really big tangent, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing that's really cool about where you're at with things is how short of a period of time you've been doing this for, and the level of success you've been able to hit with it, from the standpoint of the quality of work you're putting out. Like, even stuff from like now based on last year, right? Like is a lot of the photography work that you're doing for different restaurants and things like that, like the quality has improved dramatically, and you could see those those growth jumps just through the stuff that you're putting out. And I think that's really cool to see, because photography is such like, I have friends that are photographers. I know a lot of photographers just through through music, right? Music has photography everywhere. Everybody wants to be a live band photographer, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I think that I see so many people that are really talented with it, but they're not getting the jobs. They're not, you know, getting clients reaching out to them and stuff like that, because it's almost too accessible, I feel like. And media is one of those things where, you know, if you look at like the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world and stuff like that, you know, they push it so heavily, but they're pushing it so heavily because nobody wants to do it, right? A lot of companies and stuff, they just don't see the value in investing in that. Like they would any other position, right? If you're going to pay an employee $40,000 a year to do whatever, right, to help your company grow and stuff like that, at least you could look at like the exact return on that investment of, if I pay this person this amount of money, you know, they're going to be able to do this task, and this task for me. And, you know, you could justify that expense a little bit more. But with media, it's the long game. It's 100% the long game, because
Definitely.
when I hire somebody to come in and take photos and take videos for me, I'm not going to make, that much additional right away money off of that person's jobs that they're doing. But over the long run, what I'm doing is I'm helping to paint a picture to my audience. I'm helping to paint a picture to my future clients, and for them to understand what we're doing, how we're doing, seeing it at a better quality than if I were just doing it myself, and be able to document more of stuff, which is going to make them trust me more, which is going to make them use my services more. You know, one thing we started doing at Miracle Canine recently was every single boarding dog that comes in gets featured every single day, right? If your dog is coming to boarding with us, we want you to see your dog. We want your dog to feel highlighted. We want you to know that they're in good hands. So every day we're going through and we're like, okay, cool. These dogs are boarding with us. Let's get them out. Let's go do some stuff with them. Let's document it a little bit. And let's, you know, show their owners that they're having a good time, right? They're not just sitting around and bored and just waiting for their owner to come and get them and stuff like that. And again, initially that does nothing, right? That's all stuff for current clients.
Exactly.
Right? They've already used the service. They've already paid for those services. So it's not like I'm trying to get more money out of them, right? But I'm continuing to build the trust, because since I've gotten started, and I know this is very similar for you as well, the reason why I think we grew so fast is because of that word of mouth, right? And it's so huge, right? You could look at the media and all that kind of stuff to help, you know, branch out. And, you know, this podcast is going to be able to be distributed on more of a national spectrum, as opposed to just like regional or local, or for the people that are actually going to use our services. You know, that word of mouth is so big, and that's so essential for any small to mid-sized business, I think. Well,
I think even with, you know, this whole coronavirus epidemic, I think it's really shown people how important it is to stay relevant in people's minds. You know, a lot of the clients that I've had recently, like the Pompadour on Fairport Harbor, like we had a really good discussion. She's like, I just want to stay relevant in people's minds. So I want the media that I can keep posting out to people, because they can't come in here right now. You know, they're takeout and then very limited seating. I mean, they're a very small bar. So this has really hit them pretty hard, because, you know, you have to have the 6-foot space. So I think it's shown people a lot more that, oh, we need this presence. You know, we need this quality content to come out, and people to still know that we're here, you know, because there's so many, especially in the restaurant industry. I mean, how many restaurants can you think of right off the top of your head, you know, that are down one street, you know? And it's like you're literally competing every day for people to eat their meal at your establishment. So you have to keep yourself in that mindset, like, as you said, like for those future clients, or even with the boarding dogs, that you keep that content coming. You know, it still gives them, like, in their mind, like, oh, there's my dog. You know, it's just like you're always in people's minds, people's space, headspace, that they'll come and use your business.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, it's been a blessing and a curse, obviously. I'm not going to say COVID's a great thing. It's not.
Sure.
It's just made people realize how important it is for their advertising their product.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting with everything going on right now. I was talking to Steve Perino. He's a sound engineer in the Cleveland area. He records obviously music, live music and bands and stuff. And he's who came over and helped me get all of this podcast equipment set up because I know nothing about any of that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Steve.
We appreciate you, Steve.
Yes.
Compass Audio, hit them up. They're great. Steve was another guitar player in my band, fantastic musician, fantastic audio engineer. But anyways, he was here and we're talking about everything going on. And I was just like, it's just wild because this whole pandemic has created and I told him, I was like, don't take this the wrong way, but it has created immense opportunity for everybody. And that opportunity is not just what you think of when you think of opportunity, where it's like, go out and do something, and, you got to take advantage of it, go work harder, and this and that and everything. But it's put so many things into perspective for everybody on a personal as well as on a larger scale, like with your businesses and stuff like that. It's put everything in perspective of the things you were doing before are changing to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And, you could debate all day long, how serious things are, this or that or whatever. But the fact is that right now, the way that we're living our day-to-day lives are so much different. So if you are, from a personal standpoint, just in a toxic space of not liking where you're at and hating your job and being, having anxiety and depression, all these types of things, right? It's putting that even more into perspective because you can't go out and do a lot of those things you normally would do to cope with those things. So you have to address them head on. And whether that looks like you do less and you go out less and you stay home and you work on yourself and you read and you exercise and you do all these types of things, or if that looks like you go out and you change your career path and you go do something else or whatever it may be. And then from a business standpoint, it's created the opportunity of you could see the holes in your company, right? That's so huge. You could see, what am I doing wrong? What have I leaned on as a crutch, right? What have I been just so dependent on that's worked for me in the past, whether that's from a restaurant standpoint. I feel like I know so many, like when I was living in Lyndhurst, there was this bar we would go to around the corner called Scalpers, right? And Scalpers had the best boneless wings in the city. They were so good, right?
Yeah.
But that place had the thing it had going for it was a fun little kind of local sports bar that had TVs on every square inch of the place and this and that. And guess what? Nobody can go there and do that anymore, right? So they got to shift. They got to figure out, okay, cool. Am I leaning too much on this as a crutch? Have I not focused on, my marketing and all this kind of stuff to get myself to a broader spectrum now that I need to do delivery and stuff?
Yeah.
Or I don't know if the Pompadour is like this, but I think one of the companies you were shooting for, so many of these restaurants focus on presentation of their food, right? And that's a big selling point, right? If you go to a high-end restaurant or whatever, and they bring out the plate and they got the garnishes and all the fancy stuff and everything, even though the food might be good, it's probably not that extraordinarily better. In some cases, it's that presentation that really does the selling, and that in combination with the niceness of the place or whatever it is, right? And when you're doing carry out, you can't present like that. It's not like you're gonna take a styrofoam container and do all your little swishes with your carrot sauce and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that's the Pompadour. That's what they've primarily went to because they were a fine dining restaurant, and they've made this takeout menu solely to keep people coming, and so that adaptation that you're talking about, that's what they're doing, and it's it's made them survive and profit.
Yeah. Whether that's you utilize that media and you utilize photography and stuff like that to show that product better so that people can see what it's supposed to look like and make them want to go and get it, or you make adjustments and you start looking at how do I make how do I create my products or my food or whatever it is in a way where it presents well and carry out, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyways, long story short, media, it's so huge, right? And it's something that I wanted to make a big investment in early on, which is why I hired Josh initially and why we have another media person at Miracle now, and why Josh is here doing the podcast with us and all this stuff is because I believe in it. And over the last 3 years or so that I've really put a lot of emphasis into media, from the standpoint of having people working for me and helping with those things. I've seen my business continue to grow, right? And I've continued to see the reach improve, and I've continued to see clients come in. And, it's interesting. I made a realization a couple, maybe 6 months ago or something like that. A lot of the content we're putting out on Instagram and social media and stuff like that, it's for our current clients. It's not for reaching out to new people like we were talking about. It's the video tips and the question and answers and stuff like that. It's for the people that are asking the questions, the new people or the people that are finding our page and stuff. But every single one of those helps our clients better. I have them come in for one-on-ones, and they're like, I watched that one video you posted, and it just hit the nail on the head with this one issue I'm having, and I started adjusting this way or this way, and it really helped. And it's so cool to see. It's been really awesome. So, looking forward to continue building on that kind of stuff.
For sure.
So. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do here next is we're going to start getting into some more specific dog stuff. I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this from a dog training standpoint as well. Obviously we talked about, all of the other reasons and stuff like that, but currently we're living in this really weird time where being a dog trainer is so easy. There is zero regulations on it. And not that I think that there should be. I'm very happy that I don't have to go to Joe Schmo dog training school in order to get certified when I already know how to do all of this kind of stuff. But the problem is, because it's so easy to get into and because it's an industry that you could charge so much money for, there are people that have really capitalized on that. And I think there's some dog trainers out there right now that are doing a heavy disservice to the community just by offering these courses where it's like, come spend 5 days with me and I'll teach you how to be a dog trainer and run a business. And there's some that even go as far as they market that in 5 days or a week, we're going to teach you how to not only be a dog trainer, which is unrealistic. First off, you're not going to figure it out in 5 days, but we're also going to teach you how to make a 6-figure business like overnight, basically. Right. And a lot of it comes down to changing perceptions, which again, all of these things are important. I don't want to say they're not, because if you're running a business, you need, if you want to grow it to the standpoint of being very successful and making more money and all these types of things, you have to understand how to do these things. You have to understand client perception. You have to understand what can I do to make them feel more comfortable. And you have to understand, how do I know when to raise my prices and this and that. They're all normal business things. But the problem is they're centering it so solely around dog training for new dog trainers that shouldn't be doing that, because in the end of the day, we're in a customer service business where the client is needing a service. This isn't just this isn't just like that t-shirt's cool and I want to buy that, so like how do I sell more t-shirts to people or whatever. This is, how do I impact people's lives in a positive manner. We have people that they have dogs that are going to die if they don't get the help. We have people out there that if the dogs don't get trained properly, these dogs are going to hurt people or whatever, right? Like there's serious situations, and because you're dealing with such heavy emotions, because we live in a culture where dogs are our children right now, which we'll obviously get into that. But because we're in that type of world right now, people are willing to just spend whatever on getting these things fixed. I have clients that call me that I could just tell by how they're talking. You name the number, they're going to pay it if I could help them with their dog. And all you have to do is just say, yeah, I could help you with it. It's literally that easy. And it's upsetting to see that. Like I said, it's so simple for these dog trainers to get involved in that. And most of my clients that I get in right now have been to 1, 2, 3 other dog trainers before and have had little success. And I think that the root of the problem comes to people, as well as new dog trainers, are not understanding dogs well enough. They're not spending the time really observing and seeing and understanding, how do these animals learn? How do they communicate? How do they communicate with people? How do they communicate with dogs? How do they communicate with their environment? And it's very interesting to see. So, and you've obviously seen quite a bit of that being around it. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I feel like when you bring up that point, there's these people that try to, I can teach you how to do this in 5 days, whatever. I just feel like that just breeds like misinformation and
big time.
And so many problems because, I mean, you know, I read that book you gave me from Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
Plugging in, but you know, I need to read it like 2 or 3 more times to just really soak in all the soak the information in. And it's like the you know, these people go and get these 5-day courses. I mean, and then think that they're ready, you know?
Yeah.
And I've, you know, in the 2 years, 3 years that I worked with you, I mean, we've seen and heard about plenty of people that, oh, I just learned how to train my dog and I started a business out of my house. And then, you know, these your clients who went to them, and then like you said, they got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
And they paid, you know, maybe $500 or $1,000 or whatever,
or more. I mean, in some cases you're talking $3,000 to $4,000.
Yeah.
Josh, is this still recording?
Let me check.
All right, guys, quick 2-second intermission here to make sure the camera is still recording. We have to make sure we see a red dot. If we don't see a red dot, we're in trouble. Was it still going?
It must have stopped.
Uh-oh.
I'll have to put a... Sorry.
That's okay. I think we caught it just in time. I think I saw it go black.
Okay.
Well, the audio is still rolling, so we'll put a little black bar there.
Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah.
But
we're getting we're
technical difficulties. We're
getting
figuring this
kinks
out here.
Yeah.
You know, we got to see how long can we record for? How long does it take before? Let me just check the audio while we're at it. Make sure we're still rolling.
Yeah.
Which we are.
Okay, good.
Wow, 32 minutes. We're rolling along. So and what happens is the more that stuff like that happens, it kills trust, right? So clients have a harder and a harder time each time trusting their dog trainer, no matter how much they look at them and think like, you really seem like you got it going, right? Like, I know that I could actually help you, right?
Yep.
But if they've already been burned by 2 other people before, then, you know, they're going to come into it a little bit more hesitant, right? They're going to come into it without this like gung-ho, like, I'm ready to do this, I'm ready to work through this, because they've already tried that and they've already been promised those things before in the past.
Yeah. And now they have a chip on their shoulder when they come in.
Sometimes, yeah, and in some cases they do, and in some cases they're just upset, right? It's just like, you know, like they don't have the confidence that they could work through these things, right? And again, it comes down to not understanding the dog, right?
Yep.
And listen, here's the thing. So, you know, everybody starts somewhere, right? You know, you were once a brand new photographer that needed to, you know, work on their skills and this and that, right? And I'm sure you did work that you weren't 100% proud of, as have I, right? There are plenty of dogs that I could think of that I've trained in the past that I was like, you know, like I definitely could have done a better job with that. But I think the key is that you have to know your worth, right? And that's a weird one, because when a lot of people say you got to know your worth, it's mostly like you're undervaluing yourself, right? Which is true a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
There was definitely a point in time where I was just nervous to raise my prices, or I was nervous to take in certain clients, even though I knew I could work on those things and I knew I could help them with those things. But the problem was I didn't feel confident enough to do it, right? You got to play on that fine line, because listen, I also know the feeling of being the young dog trainer that's got the chip on his shoulder of, I'm going to show all these other guys that I know what I'm doing when I actually didn't know what I was doing. And, you know, you can get yourself into trouble doing that as well. So I think you got to find that balance when you're getting started as a younger trainer. I work with a lot of younger trainers. I have a guy that's kind of shadowing with me right now. And, you know, I basically tell him, I was like, listen, you know, even if you think you're super, super good at it, you need to really establish yourself first before you start raising those prices. And you need to really establish yourself before you start, you know, promising the world to people. And some of my favorite dog trainers that I know out there that are a little younger or newer in things are the ones that know what's in their skill set and what's not in their skill set. Because 99% of the time when they're getting themselves into trouble with these types of things, it's with more serious behavioral cases, right? It's with the aggression, it's with the heavy anxiety and all of those types of things, right? Because here's the thing. If you get somebody that comes in with a puppy, a little 8-week-old, 10-week-old, 14, whatever, week-old puppy, and you promise them this dog's going to be fully trained and off leash and this and that, and if you don't meet those goals, it's not good, right?
No.
Especially if you're charging a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if it was a cheap rate and you help them, you know, get some better communication with the dog and learn a little bit more and stuff like that, it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, look at Petco, for example, the infamous Petco, right? Petco sucks.
Yeah.
They're not good dog trainers. No. It's glorified trick training, right? It's let's show you how to take some treats and show them how to do this and that. And, you know, you can get into the conversation of how much they bash what everybody else is doing, which is why they're not great.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, the problem is that we see people time and time again, they go through Petco classes, right? And they train their dog. And virtually everybody I know that gets a puppy has been through a Petco class to teach them how to sit and down and do all these types of things.
Yeah.
And those people, because it wasn't a serious thing, and even though the dog isn't perfect with all those commands and stuff like that, they're still willing to reach out for help when they start having issues later on and not feel like it's like the end of the world or not feel like they were gypped or anything like that, even though they kind of were. So, you know, from a basic obedience standpoint and stuff, it's not that big of a deal if you're kind of doing that as a younger dog trainer. And a lot, like I was saying, a lot of my favorite my favorite trainers that I see out there are the ones that know their skill set, and they'll work with those types of things until they feel very, very competent in it, right? And they'll charge little amount of money, you know, initially as they're kind of getting their name for it and doing better with it and stuff like that. And then, you know, a lot of people want to eventually make that transition into working with behavioral cases. And my favorite ones are the ones that either, one, refer those people out, depending on the severity of the case, because in the end of the day, if you have a dog that's really hurting people or really hurting other dogs, or it's really, you know, on its last leg, it's probably not a dog you should take on as your first behavioral case or anything like that, right? You got to learn somewhere, but those ones are a little bit more serious and a little bit more out of your wheel well, and the ones that need a little bit of additional help, obviously. Or if you get one that has behavioral issues, but maybe it isn't like the end of the world, it's not the most serious thing that's ever worked, you do it for free initially because you need to learn somehow. You need to work with these dogs in order to figure it out. But if you're going into it telling them, hey, listen, you know, I've helped you with all these things. You've been a paying client up until this point. I haven't worked a ton with this kind of stuff, but I think I could help you a little bit with it. Let me just experiment a little bit. You know, let me play around with it and see if I can get you moving in the right direction. And then if I can't, then I'll refer you out to somebody. And here's the thing. If I can, then we could talk about rates. Then we could talk about, you know, how I can get compensated for this in the future, right? And you do that a lot of times. And what happens is you build trust. And what happens is if it doesn't work, that person doesn't have it in their head, oh, man, I did training. I already tried to work through this problem and it didn't work, because they know you went into it honestly of, listen, I'm not an expert at this. I haven't done this 9 million times with a ton of success and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to help you out, but if it doesn't work, I'll refer you out to somebody else. And there's so many good trainers out there that are doing stuff like that, whether it's because they're still learning or whether it's because they don't want to dive into that path. And what happens is that maintains the integrity of the dog training world. And it's so important. So what I have here is I have a couple of different questions that we get asked on a fairly regular basis. I picked 3 of them because I think that they showcase so well what I was just talking about people and trainers not understanding their dogs, right? And I think that they incrementally show how things can get worse as you don't understand your dogs, right? So I'm going to read these off, and then we'll talk about the similarities between them, and then we'll talk about actually going in and answering some of these. So,
sounds good.
First one is we have a dog at home, a 2-year-old lab. When out walking or hiking, she will bark at all dogs and humans. How do we work on this and build her confidence around others? Next one. I have 3 sons, ages 14, 12, and 10, who like to wrestle. Our 4-year-old Great Dane gets upset when they do, barking at them and sometimes mouthing an arm. How can I help her know they are okay and just playing? I feel like she thinks one of them is getting hurt, but they are just playing. Next one. This one's a little bit longer, and this one's a little bit more serious. Hey, David, someone suggested I contact you. I recently moved to Alaska with my year-old male setter. Once we got here, we moved in with 2 males, one I'm dating. Amos, my pup, has since basically fallen to pieces. He went from a well-behaved dog with occasional but manageable guarding tendencies to a dog who I barely recognize. He's constantly on alert and has tried to attack both of my roommates at different times. I'm trying crate training and boundaries, and he's so sensitive. I don't know what to do, and I'm scared it's going to get out of hand. So all 3 of those have a similar thing. They're all being humanized, right? So in the first one here, if I pull these up one more time. So in the first one, how do I help build her confidence around others? This is going into it with the expectation or the assumption, I should say, that the lab is not confident around dogs or humans, when in actuality, 90% of dogs, when they see other people or dogs out on the walk, they get excited and they start barking. But it has nothing to do with confidence. In some cases it does, but in most cases it has to do with just general arousal and frustration and having a lack of training and, not understanding the leash and pulling into it, and that frustration building up and turning into this reactivity and stuff like that. And looking at it as, how do I build confidence? That addresses the whole situation wrong, because if I go into this of, I got to build confidence, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to get my dog more excited because they're not confident, and an excitement suddenly equates to, confidence and stuff like that. What's going to happen is you're going to make the problem worse, right? So we got to look at this of, what is the problem? What is the dog doing because they are quote unquote not confident? Are they reacting? Are they barking? The question should not be, how do I build confidence? The question should be, how do I stop the dog from doing that? And more specifically, why is the dog doing that in the first place, instead of making an assumption of why the dog is doing that in the first place? And let me also caveat this. This question is from a fantastic dog owner. This question is from somebody that drove their dog in from out of state for a board and train with us, and they're asking about their other dog. This is not the dog that we trained.
Okay.
So this is a great person, right? But what I'm trying to get at here is, people don't understand dogs, and that lack of education is what's creating so many problems. And I think that lack of education, or that improper information, like you were saying, that's getting spread out there by other trainers or by just people in general thinking that they understand dogs. I mean, how many people call us and say, I've trained all 17 of my dogs in the past and this one just don't get it. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everyone thinks, I've owned 6 dogs my whole life.
Yes.
I know what to do with my dog.
Yes. And the problem is, because it's compounding on itself, right? Is that lack of information is spreading further and further and getting more intense and more intense and more intense, till we hit a point where right now, like, we have so many more behavioral issues with our dogs than we did 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I use this example all the time. I tell clients all the time. I remember when I was younger, I was at like a pool party with my friends, and, our parents were there and we're hanging out and stuff like that. And they had this little dog. It was, I don't know, little mutt thing, scruffy thing. And, the dog was in the corner. It was a hot day out. Dog probably should have been inside, whatever. And I remember getting out of the pool and going up to the dog while I was in a corner and going and petting the dog, and the dog bit me right on the hand. Oh. And it was not a great, I remember it hurt real bad. I remember it broke skin. I remember crying and throwing a little hissy fit about it. Yeah. And guess what my parents told me? Don't pet the dog. Why'd you pet the dog? It's my fault. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Yeah, it's hot out. The dog is over there in a corner. Why did you pet the dog? That's your fault, right? Yep. You know what happened right now? Boom, euthanasia immediately.
Pretty much.
Right? Yep. I mean, come on. Like, the dog bit somebody. We're not going to even look into why the dog bit somebody or what we did wrong or anything like that. Is it, is the dog acting out like aggressively all the time and seeking out and biting everybody? Or are we not understanding that dog's needs? Yeah. Are we not understanding that the dog was hot outside, it was in a corner, and it shouldn't have been cornered and pet at that point? Yep. So again, seeing these problems all the time. So anyways, so not understanding the dog in that situation. Looking at the next one here, 3 sons like to wrestle. 4-year-old Great Dane gets upset. Oh man, this happens too. You've seen me do this a lot of times, where I talk really fast and I forget to breathe. Yeah, you need to breathe. Breathe. I'm gonna take a couple breaths here. Okay, getting passionate here, and barking at them, sometimes mouthing an arm. And then we get to the actual question, right? They give me the information, and instead of leaving that at that, of how do I fix this problem, we get into the actual question, which is, how can I help her know that they are okay and just playing? I feel like she thinks one of them is getting hurt. Again, immediately humanizing this. This is not an issue of the dog thinking that these kids are not okay or getting hurt, right? Our dogs, not every dog has this ingrained protection. Yeah. That we think they do. Everybody thinks that, somebody breaks into my house and my dog's going to protect me, or, my dog's just being defensive of me and they don't want people coming into our space. First off, if they are doing that, actually, your dog's job is not to protect you, right? No. Your dog's job is is to listen and for you to protect them, right? That's a big post I made that did really well. I remember a long time ago was it's not our job's dog to protect us. It's our job to protect our dogs, right? Because dogs, we could say they're smart all day long, and they are. And there are some that are more intelligent than others and this and that. But in the end of the day, dogs are not as smart as people, right?
No.
They can't process complex information like we can, reason, and they don't know how to start a podcast, right? They don't know how to do all those types of things.
No.
So by us assuming that they're intelligent enough to know when people are okay and know when people aren't okay and to be able to protect us and to make decisions on when they need to intimidate people and bark at them or bite them or things like that, that's just asinine. We should not be thinking that way. It's irresponsible, right? These dogs are not intelligent enough to do those types of things, and we need to start giving them better information with this stuff. So anyways, this dog isn't thinking these kids aren't okay. What's happening is dogs trigger off of arousal. I always use the example of if I just got up, if one of my dogs were up here and I just got up and started flailing my arms around and running circles around this room, my dog would get pumped up, right? And that has nothing to do with that has nothing to do with me or my dog thinking that something's wrong with me. They're just sensing that change in arousal in the room.
Yeah, you're making so much stimuli in the area that they just react.
It's overwhelming.
To it.
I can't. I don't want to do this. This is a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you have a dog. Does Bender do things like that? Like, do you notice certain things in your day to day that create excitement with him that you could probably perceive as like a human related thing if you really wanted to?
I mean, sure, food or if you run down the hallway, he gets excited. He starts running with you.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's a herding animal,
Sure.
That's what people say. But it's like, he just gets aroused by that. Like, oh, he's running. Oh, I got to run with him too,
Yeah.
Or if you try to like play with him, he jumps on you or whatever. Like that's what he's going to do because he's jacked up. Yeah.
Yep. So again, looking at this here, the dog is not thinking that. The dog is not able to control arousal, right? And when you have an untrained dog and you're presenting arousal into the mix, what's going to happen is the dog is going to feed off of that, and the dog is going to start escalating and escalating and escalating. And if you don't have a way to be able to slow that dog down or to decrease that arousal, it's going to start to turn into things like this, right? Obviously, we want your kids to be able to run around and play and have a good time without the dog going and barking at them and mouthing at their arms and stuff. So you got to figure out a way to decrease that arousal, right? That should be the question is, how do I get my dog to stop barking and mouthing at my kids when they're wrestling with each other, right? So it's rephrasing the question in a way where you can get a tactical solution here, right? Because you can't sit down and tell the dog, hey, it's okay. Joey's not getting hurt.
Yeah.
Joey's not going to get a black eye from this, I promise. Right? Dogs don't understand that. They just understand, do this, don't do this. I always say, the only two things dogs can understand is when we like what they're doing or when we don't like what they're doing. So you have to make any issue you're having with your dog black and white like that if you want to get past it. Getting into the last question here, the more serious one. We got a guy that moved to we have a girl that moved to Alaska with her dog, moved in with two guys. The dog has went from being great with occasional but manageable guarding techniques to a dog they barely recognize, attacking the other roommates at different times. And then the couple things that stand out, this is when I get questions in like this, I dissect them and I try to look at what's really standing out to me that's giving me the information that I need to know, right? So the couple things that are standing out to me are the occasional but manageable guarding techniques. Now, I always say guarding is never okay, right? Behavioral issues like these, any sort of aggressive displays are never okay, because what tends to happen is when we say manageable guarding techniques, we say there are things that my dog does not like when I do or when somebody else does or whatever it may be, right? So there are these things that they don't like that I'm doing, and I have learned to not do those things so that my dog doesn't guard, right?
Yeah.
That's not good.
That's not good.
You can't adjust what you're doing based on your dog, because here's the thing. Even though you could manage it really effectively and you can make sure that situation never presents itself, at some point, something will always happen, and you need to get your dog to do something that they don't want to do. And because they know that certain things work, no matter how minor those issues are, it's always going to turn into a problem later on. right? And you're going to see that escalate dramatically, especially when you look at situations where you're moving into an entirely new place. I don't know where they're moving from, obviously, but going to Alaska sounds like a big change. That sounds like a big life change. Anyways, second thing that's standing out to me is I'm trying crate training and boundaries. You know what that means to me? This dog has never been formally trained. This owner has, and again, I promise I'm not trying to shame these owners here right now. I'm trying to make really tactical, usable information for people to help them understand this stuff better, because that's what we're trying to do with this right now. This person has probably never tried any sort of formal training or never even tried to set boundaries or anything for the dog, because they're under the assumption that the dog is sensitive, right? So if I set boundaries, or if I try to get the dog to do things that they don't want to do, like probably put the dog in a crate when it was 8 weeks old and the dog freaked out and they were like, this dog's sensitive, I can't have him in the crate, right? What's going to happen? They're going to stop doing those things. They're going to let the dog do whatever it wants to do. And if it's really that sensitive, this dog is likely pretty emotionally unstable. This dog likely doesn't know how to cope with any sort of stress, and has learned that these aggressive displays work when they're stressed out.
You made the dog the boss.
You've made the dog the boss. And the key here is you've made the dog the boss that does not have the emotional capacity to be the boss, right?
Yeah.
There are those dogs out there that are just so rock solid stable that you could do anything in the world with these dogs and it's not going to pose a big problem. Right?
Yeah.
My dog Vera, I use as an example of that all the time. She is so goddamn good with pretty much anything. Like, she's got her little quirks. Like, she likes food so much that if I leave food laying around on the coffee table, she's probably gonna try to grab it every now and then. You know, she gets really excited sometimes, you know, whatever. But I could do nothing with that dog, and I feel 99% confident she's not going to bite anybody ever.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to be a big deal. She's so happy-go-lucky. She loves people. My fiance's brother has been in town for the last couple of weeks, and literally from the second she met him, like, he was staying in our guest bedroom, and she would just go in there and sleep in there with him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
She's just super, super stable, right? So there are those dogs out there that exist, but the problem is we'll see a lot of people, and this goes back to the conversation, we're jumping around all over the place, this goes back to the conversation of people thinking that they've trained all of their dogs, right?
Yep.
I've seen so many people that have had 3 dogs before, right? And because they've had such consistently stable dogs, that's why they have that assumption that they're such a good dog trainer. And that's why they have that assumption that they're able to do all of this stuff on their own. Then when you got
lucky with
you got super lucky with 3 dogs. Maybe I would say, like, you know, what's the most dogs that somebody's probably had in their lifetime? Well, I don't know, 6, 7, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I would say I've trained that many dogs in the first half of my day, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen so many more dogs than that, and I've seen so many more temperaments that I know that you don't have this anomaly dog. You don't have this dog that we've never seen before. You just have a dog that requires more than your average dog needs, right? And you could either provide that or you can not provide that. But going back to this person and this question here, they haven't done any sort of training. They've created the boss out of this dog. And then what happens is you hit a point where you understand the routine you need to be in with the dog in order for the dog to be okay with it, right?
Yep.
You've adjusted your life and your current environment to a point where the dog's able to be successful. And then what happens is you have to move. And everything changes at that point, right? And because everything changes right off of the rip, we can't adjust all of those things to the dog like we were able to in our last environment.
Yep.
The dog suffers because the dog is not able to be the boss, and the dog starts acting out tenfold because they're used to doing what they want to do when they want to do it.
Yep.
And it turns into enormous problems. And you'll see some of these dogs that we've just learned to manage and figure out their issues, that you change that environment and boom, like you said here, you barely recognize the dog due to how poorly they're acting right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, any small stability that you had, you've just taken completely away.
Completely away. Yeah. Any sense of security that dog has had through controlling those types of things. So, the root of the problem here is understanding arousal, understanding how to communicate with your dog effectively, which means understanding how to tell them yes and no in a way that they really understand, which is what I tell everybody. That is the focus of our programs. And then figuring out what are the specific things that I need to stop, right? How do I work through these problems? And 90% of the time, it's not that complicated. 90% of the time, it comes down to breaking it down in the simplest way possible and figuring out how do I discipline my dog or reward my dog for things. And I'll tell you what, I have almost never in my life needed to tell somebody, you need to reinforce or reward your dog more.
Yeah.
When it comes to behavioral issues, it's never the case. Everybody, if go into like positive only training and stuff like that, if positive only training worked so well for behavioral issues, they would monopolize the game. How many owners do you know out there that would not pump their dog full of treats all day long if they were told that it was going to work?
Every single person.
If it worked, it would be done. We would be out of business. Nobody wants to use an e-collar. No. You know what I mean? Like even me. Listen, I don't want to have to correct my dog for things. I don't want to do things that are causing discomfort and stuff like that. But here's the thing. That's how animals learn, right? And the more, I've in the last couple of years, I started getting really, really, really into socialization with other dogs. And the amount that I've learned through socializing dogs with each other and socializing them without micromanaging them, because that's what I see 90% of socialization is at this point, is constantly, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. You're not allowed to hump this dog. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. Dogs know how to communicate all these things on their own. And guess what they do? They either play with each other and compete with each other and have fun with each other, or they communicate boundaries. And how do they do that? They do that through discomfort. They do that through intimidation. They do that through growling, biting, barking, all of those types of things to let the other dog know in a way that they understand, I don't like what you're doing, right? And the more that you do stuff like that, the more you learn. And it's so fascinating and so interesting to watch.
Well, like even, so Bender is, a cattle dog. They're very intelligent, but we conditioned him to an e-collar as well because he's very protective of his space. If there's someone that new comes into the house, he starts barking, he gets upset. It's very stimulating to him. So we can have him conditioned to the e-collar just so he knows that, no, you don't get to do this. Like even the best dogs sometimes, they need that extra thing to keep them under you, so they're not the boss. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, we're going to take a 5-second pee break here.
Okay.
So we're going to pause real quick. Pause. Right. So, yeah, like we were talking about, the arousal is the enemy. You were talking about getting Bender conditioned up to the e-collar, which is Josh's dog, obviously, being able to start doing those things. So, like I said, yeah, nobody wants to have to do that. Nobody wants to have to correct their dogs, but it is a necessity. It is something that if you're not doing it, it's gonna pose problems, right? The dog is not going to clearly understand everything that it is that you want, and you're not going to be communicating effectively like dogs do in the wild, right?
Yep.
So going in and looking at some of these questions and looking at, okay, cool. Well, so if we rephrase the question, how would we actually solve the problem if we broke it down that simply, right? So in the case of the 2-year-old lab, walking and hiking, barking at dogs and humans, how do we work on this and build our confidence? Changing that question to how do we stop the barking? How do we stop the barking at all of the dogs and humans? Well, first and foremost, you also have to look at, is the dog doing anything else aside from barking? 9 times out of 10, if the dog hasn't been trained before, they're going to be pulling on a leash as well. And if they're pulling on a leash as well, that pulling on a leash is typically what leads to the barking. So we have to fix that problem first. So we create a clear expectation with that heel position. We teach that, which is where some of the reinforcement comes into play. Then we enforce that, which is where the punishment comes into play. So saying yes and saying no. We use the yes in order to teach behaviors. We use the no in order to punish for behaviors. Once we have that established, 9 times out of 10, the barking is going to go away. And if the barking does not go away, you do something the dog doesn't like in order to correct them for it. That can be an e-collar, that can be a pet corrector, that can be any of those types of tools. But you have to figure out, what does my dog really not like that I can implement for a correction? And here's the thing. A lot of people will ask questions about dogs that are sensitive, for example, right? Yeah. They'll be like, I can't correct my dog because they're sensitive. And I'm like, well, if you look at what is the goal is to stop a behavior. The goal is to stop the dog from doing something. If they're sensitive, that makes your job easier. That means that you don't have to use as much pressure. That means they're going to get the point the first time, as opposed to some of these kind of more bullheaded, stubborn dogs that can kind of tolerate a little bit more, and you got to correct them repeatedly for stuff because they try to push through it, and they're opportunists and all this kind of stuff. If your dog is sensitive, you can correct them so easily. My fiance's dog, Deli, is such a sensitive, insecure dog in general. That's just her personality. That's her DNA. And if she does something that I don't want her to do, correcting her is so easy. Because you even look at her the wrong way and she's like, oh, she gets all nervous and stuff. So, teach her walking, enforce your walking, correct for the barking. Next question, the 3 sons who like to wrestle, Great Dane gets upset, barks at them, mouths at arms. How do we fix that? Rephasing the question to, how do I stop my dog from barking and mouthing at my kids when they're wrestling? Correction-based. You attach a consequence to a clear behavior. It should be so easy. I always say, I don't typically like when people go out and just buy an e-collar and start correcting their dog, just because if you have goals of then using that e-collar in more of a communicative fashion and teaching things with it and stuff like that, it can make the process a little bit harder later on. But honestly, like, all this perception that you're going to just ruin the dog if you do it is not true. I mean, 90% of people, if they would just go out and buy an e-collar and set it to a level that the dog doesn't care about, and to isolate 2 behaviors at a time that the dog is doing that they don't want from a behavioral standpoint. So say like jumping or biting or mouthing, right? Which are 2 common things we'll see people have. If you just get one and you just start correcting every time the dog does it, and you don't even say anything, you just tap the button when the dog jumps on somebody, or you tap the button when the dog's mouthing on somebody, and you do it at a level that they really care about, those behaviors are literally going to go away immediately. It's so easy. It's literally so easy. And, that's 90% of the problem right now. So you start correcting for the barking and the mouthing at the arm. You stop the dog from doing those things. From there, if you want to, you could add in management techniques of getting the dog to hold a bed stay or something while they're in the process of playing, when the kids are wrestling around and stuff like that, just to practice even further impulse control. That's going to help the dog later on, but that's not even necessary, because 90% of the time, if the dog were not doing the barking and the mouthing, you probably wouldn't care what they're doing. You probably wouldn't care if they're laying around or doing all of those things. Then you got the more extreme example. You have the example of the dog that is attacking roommates, right? This one's a lot more complicated. This is one that you can't really, there's no easy solution for it, because this is what happens. This is what the reason why I picked this question is, this is what happens once you get too deep. Once you've missed all of the opportunities of correcting the dog for mouthing and barking at your kids, and you just figure out how to manage the issue by just putting the dog in another room while they're doing it. This is what happens when you don't stop the dog from barking at other people on the walk, and instead you walk at night, or you walk in situations where you're not going to see other people, or you just pull across the street so that the dog barking and pulling, you don't lose control of them. This is what happens when all of those things build up and you don't create boundaries. With some dogs, will escalate to this point. So when we hit this point, what do we got to do? We got to backtrack. We got to start from the beginning. We have to crate train the dog. We have to set boundaries, which is going to mean making your list of the top 5 things that the dog is doing in the house from a general behavioral standpoint. When I get people that call me with like questions like this, usually the first thing I ask them is like, okay, well, outside of the aggression that you're seeing, what behavioral issues does the dog have? Because 9 times out of 10, they're barking out the window. 9 times out of 10, they're leapfrogging all over the furniture in the house whenever they want to. 9 times out of 10, they're jumping on you or guests. 9 times out of 10, they can't be in a crate without losing their mind. In this case, the kind of minor but manageable guarding issues, there's so many things right there that we need to work on before we even worry about having this dog around new people right now, because you got to take your step back and you got to address those things first. You got to create consequences for the jumping, create consequences for being on the furniture initially. You got to create all of these different things. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to get over those types of issues. And as you work through those things, and it shouldn't be the longest process in the world, but once you get that dog into that compliant state of mind, then you start the process of reintroducing them to new people or your roommates or whatever it may be in a controlled fashion. But these are these things that people should be looking at ahead of time before moving into a new situation. If you don't have the ability to communicate with your dog and you change environments, you run a risk of it going really poorly. I usually tell everybody, if you're moving, like a lot of people that sign up for board and trains with us, they'll say, I'm moving into a new house. And I was like, okay, great. Well, let's get that training done before you get into the house, or let's get that training done while you're in the process of transitioning to the new house. So when the dog comes home from the board and train, you're going to be able to successfully successfully integrate them into that house without feeling like you can't communicate if the dog starts doing any of these things. If the new neighbor spooks them and they start reacting at the fence line, do you have the communication to be able to establish that and address that if it comes up?
Yeah, and I think people need to realize too, especially like the Alaska case, is you're peeling back all these layers that have been put on from all these years or however long you've had that dog, that he's been able to have free range basically. So it's not going to ever be immediate because you have so much that you have to pull back and slowly work in with your dog, you know? So I think that's the other thing is people sometimes they get very frustrated, like, oh, my dog's not getting it right away. It's like, well, he's been doing it for years and, you know, maybe you didn't see the signs now, but now that the veil has been uncovered, it's like, oh, now you see everything that has been leading up to this point. So now you have to just kind of slowly take those steps in the right direction.
Yep. Yeah, that is huge, is understanding with different dogs the process is going to be longer or shorter than others. Now, again, it shouldn't be super, super long, but, you know, if we're working with a young dog, like a year-old dog, a 2-year-old dog that's jumping, it's not that strongly ingrained of a habit. But if we're working with a 9-year-old dog, you know, that dog is going to be a little bit more, when we first correct them for that jumping, they're going to be like, what the heck? I literally always do this, and I literally always get away with it, so I don't understand what you're trying to do right now. And they get all sassy, and they don't like it a whole lot because we've allowed it for so long, right? Now, that doesn't mean we're going to change what we're doing. We're still going to correct consistently for it, but the dog's going to try it a little bit more intensely. And that's where you get into the conversation about age, and age is fairly irrelevant, right? I'm not worried that, you know, older dogs can't learn or things like that. The only issue is with age is that as the dog gets older, those issues that they're having become more and more ingrained and more habitual to them, right? You know, if you've been smoking for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, quitting is going to be much harder than if you only have been smoking for 5 months, right?
Exactly.
So, because it's such a strong habit. So, and then you figure, you know, a lot of these aroused behaviors that dogs have, they're super, super self-reinforcing, right? They feel good to do those things. So it is similar to like an addiction, right? Those dogs get addicted to those heightened levels of adrenaline and arousal and stuff like that. So it can be a little bit harder, but you know, you got to keep all those things in mind.
Yeah, it's always easier. The quicker you get to it, the easier it'll be.
That is accurate.
As with all things, usually.
Awesome. Well, we're like an hour and 10 minutes right now, so I think we're probably going to start to wrap this up a little bit. Josh, you have any last, how you feeling about everything? How did episode 1 feel?
I feel like it went pretty smooth. For the first time doing this, I feel like we've done a successful first podcast.
Started loosening up a little bit there.
Yeah, it wasn't too cringe at the beginning, and I think we flowed pretty well into the questions and everything, and I hope people enjoy our banter a little bit.
Yeah. I would like to thank whoever it was at Target last night at 10 p.m. that sold me this additional table. So I had a table that I was supposed to get like last week, and then I realized that they were not shipping at IKEA, which is just ridiculous. So we have 2 little folding tables here, and I needed a second one because this one would be way too small if I just had this one. So I go to Target at like 10 p.m. last night, right before they were closing, and the girl looked at me. She's just like, you got a table emergency tonight? I was like, actually, I kind of do have a table emergency. So this is a pretty jerry-rigged little setup we got going, but I promise it'll look nicer as we go. Don't mind the holes in the walls and all that stuff. We only have one camera angle. We'll be improving on that next time as well. It's going to get more legit. We just got to get the first one under our belt first. So, this was good. I'm excited about it.
The important step is that we did it.
We did it.
We scheduled it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So places you could follow us. You could find me on Instagram at either Davidthedogtrainer or my company page, Miracle Canine Training. Facebook, you could either search me personally, David Turpak. I have a business page. or you could follow my company, Miracle Canine Training. And then if you're interested in dog training services, phone consults, things like that, you can hit up my website, miraclecaninetraining.com. And we do all sorts of virtual consultations. We do all sorts of, obviously, in-person training, board and trains, one-on-ones, daycare and boarding, which are client exclusive. And we will be creating an email specifically for this podcast where you could send in questions, requests, things to talk about, stuff like that. I'm really excited for the next couple episodes to start having more guests on. We have actually 2 more microphones, so we are set up to be able to have up to 4 people on this show at once, which I think can get really fun with us. I'm pretty excited to do that, to get some more people on it. And then, I really want to just kind of start explaining a little bit more of this dog training side to people. So we'll start getting into passages from dog training books we could read on here and then talk about, and other kind of business and personal development related things. So I'm pretty excited for it. Josh, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Josh Dobay Productions, and then my website, if you want to look at my work or contact me if you need any work done, is www.joshdobayproductions.com.
Very cool. Josh, what's the next week have in store for you? You got any big projects you're working on?
Nothing really. This is kind of like the
podcast, the big one.
Yeah.
Now we got to figure out the process of getting it all uploaded.
Exactly. Getting it edited, uploaded, figure out all the channels and avenues that we have to go through. So
very exciting.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well, 1 hour, 12 minutes. Very excited. We're going to end that on that. This was the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode number 1.